Greetings to all of you bejeweled self-dribbling basketballs from hyperspace. This is Dharma Junkie, and I am Justin Otto. And let me tell you one thing. One thing I've noticed lately is like the division that's going on in the world, and I really just want everyone to get along. I know we all have our differences. That's going to happen. We're different people, but we're also all the same person experiencing life subjectively, and we're all connected. So quit being a fucking asshole, quit talking shit on the internet, call your mom, say hi to your neighbor, hold the door open for somebody, say please, say thank you, and fucking mean it. Like, just be a good person. It's not that hard. It's really not. It would take such a small amount of effort for you to be a better person, and for me as well. And I just want everyone to put forth that little modicum of effort, just a small amount. The world will be a better place if you did, because you are just a node in the network. Anyway, I'm rambling, but on this episode of Dharma Junkie, my guest is J. Robert Parker. He is a union-certified Master Hypnotist and the owner of Twin Ravens Hypnotherapy and Research. His mission statement is basically this: to be the light for those of us who cannot see, the guide for those of us who have lost the way, and the peace for those of us who have forgotten. He's a super cool guest. We talked about everything from hypnosis to neuro-linguistic programming to the interconnectedness of everyone and everything in the world, job dissatisfaction. Man, we touch on all kinds of shit. Anyways, super cool episode. Be sure to check him out. And if you haven't done it yet, please do me a favor. Go subscribe to the podcast. Go rate it. And leave me a nice message. Leave me a nice review. Say how much more you want to have more Justin Otto in your life. How you just crave that. How it's just a deep, repetitive... No, don't do that. Not repetitive. Crave. A desire. You desire to have more Justin Otto and more Dharma Junkie in your life. You'll be happier if you did. Without further ado, J. Robert Parker.
You might catch yourself sliding in and out of a hallucinatory state. Just relax and enjoy it. Just relax and enjoy it.
This is an experiment in mind formation. Information. Forming, controlling, operating your mind and your brain. We're using digital techniques to overload, scramble, confuse, unfocus your mind. The natural state of the brain is chaos. Chaos is beautiful.
How you doing this evening?
Good. It's been a pleasantly slow day, so
That's always enjoyable.
Yeah.
I seem to spend most of my time just being completely overwhelmed. So,
Oh yeah, absolutely.
if I feel like if I'm not completely overwhelmed, then I must be doing something wrong.
Something's obviously wrong.
Right. I'm not being productive enough. That's my big issue.
That's how it goes.
So, hypnosis. Let's dig deep, man. Let's get in there. Let's do it
That's
deep.
what hypnosis does.
Let's do a deep dive. Good point. Let's do a deep dive. So explain it to me. Like, just like I've interviewed like one other hypnotist, and we kind of touched on it a little bit, but
So the first thing I always like to stress in anything is that hypnosis is a natural process. It's not mystic. It's not metaphysical. It is an observable, monitorable process that is you're actually in it twice a day is the best way to explain that. And the times that you're in that is 30 minutes before you go to sleep and 30 minutes after you wake up. So for instance, that moment where you're conscious in the morning, but you're still kind of in bed and your thoughts drift, and it's a very relaxed time. And
Right.
Oftentimes you get very inspirational thoughts in that time.
Mhm.
That is the natural state of trance. Now, what hypnosis is versus natural trance, because it's the trance state that we're going for, is we are manually triggering that process. And basically, everything about us, humanity, people, is subconscious association. The reason for everything about the way that you are, I believe, is subconscious association. Everything from childhood, the reason you like the things you like, that you are afraid of the things you're afraid of.
Right.
And this is all what we refer to as our subconscious life script. And those associations, for better or worse, are what drive everything. And I say worse because associations can lead to bad habits and unhealthy behavior.
Right.
So what hypnosis is for is utilizing that state of trance, which is bypassing the conscious mind and going directly to the subconscious mind, what holds our behaviors and our associations, bypassing the critical filter between those two and going right to changing those associations directly towards more positive thoughts and more positive behaviors. I always struggle in these interviews to simultaneously put it in the simplest way possible, but still provide the scope of it. Because to put it too simply makes it sound almost like a joke, because I speak to your subconscious to make you act better.
Right.
And there's obviously so much more to that. And when I say hypnosis is a monitorable thing, you can hook someone up to a galvanic skin response meter and see that take place. You can hook someone up to an EKG and see the theta waves in their mind become more active and see the rise in alpha as they go towards that state.
Right.
And it's interesting because there's no end of medical and psychological research to support hypnosis at this point. It's what I base my practice on. I always encourage anyone I speak to, you want me to send you my research? Because it's 500 pages of the most boring abstracts you've ever read, but it verifies everything I'm saying.
Right. How did you get into hypnosis? Like what led you to this field? And what were you doing before this? Like, how did you make the leap from whatever that was to hypnosis?
It's actually a pretty clear line, and there's a little bit of a leap in there. So I recently moved and was kind of trying to pursue another career. And I ended up as a chef in a resort.
I'm sorry.
And it's fun. But that is how I met my girlfriend. Okay. And years later, we're still together. So I did the classic line cook, dating the waitress thing. And of course, COVID happened. And I kind of knew the writing on the wall. I knew what was coming. And sure enough, it came. And we were both out of a job. And it kind of, I felt like it fell upon me to find a way to earn a living. And I've had all sorts of strange jobs and talents and hobbies throughout my life. So every now and again, I got to look back and look at them and be like, which one of these can I?
Right. Which one of these can I fire back up? Yeah.
And the one that got fired back up was I started reading tarot cards professionally. And it was very good money, much more money than I would earn where I'm from. And that was fine and that was dandy. It has its positives and its negatives. But one of the things I started to notice is that a growing number of people were coming to me because I made a reputation for myself very quickly where I was, and I started getting a lot of business. And people were coming to me with genuine issues. And I noticed that I was less, quote, telling these people's fortunes and more using the archetypes of the tarot to reframe their problems to them
Right.
and help them work through them or find a direction. And I got a lot of real satisfaction from that. And I started thinking to myself, what's ways I can do this full time, only this. And I'd not actually had a lot of interest in hypnosis previous. The most I really had was I have a book from 1907 that's on the subject that's wacky as hell. And in retrospect, it's hilarious. I love reading from it every now and again because it's like, oh wow, we believe this. And I was on Facebook, and the algorithm decided to throw a hypnotherapy college across my lap. And that seemed interesting. So I set up a consultation, figured I'll talk to these guys. What harm could it do?
Right.
And the school offered 1 month free of charge. You basically take 101 for different courses for free. And at the end of that, you decide whether you want to do the full 720-hour program.
Right.
And I figured, why not? They said they offered handwriting analysis. I thought that sounded interesting. Previous to that, I'd never seen hypnosis be done. I'd never had it done to me. And I'd certainly, not to my knowledge, done it to someone else.
Right.
And I say that, I use that qualifier very specifically.
Okay.
So I still remember the first time I saw someone's arm move without them consciously making it. And it blew my mind. And then someone made me do it. And it absolutely blew my mind.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And I started noticing all of these quantifiable physiological things that happened in hypnosis. And I started noticing changes in my own behavior. And this was all in the first month.
Oh, wow.
And so, of course, I signed up for the program. And this is my calling. Like this, for the first time in my life, I truly and honestly love what I do.
That's awesome. It's fantastic. You know what's funny is like the more people I talk to, because I interview a lot of coaches and just people in kind of the more niche aspects of mental health and things of this nature. And the more people I talk to, the more people I realize have, like, during the pandemic, have shifted their career choice to doing something that they absolutely love to do and have like managed to be fruitful and successful doing so.
I think it's one of those, you're left with no other choice. You have no excuses.
Right.
So there's no longer even a risk. It's a risk that's going to exist anyway. So why not attempt to do what you've always loved?
Right.
And I can consign on that statement because, like, some of my clients have had a very transformative moment in this period because they've left their job. They're forced to rethink things, and sometimes it's a job that people have done for a very long time.
Right.
But they step away and they get out of that pattern and they realize, man, I've been miserable this whole time. I don't want to go back. I want to do what I want to do. And there is a lot of that. And it's interesting because I've seen signs of that. Like some of my peers have got office space in these big shared office complexes. But instead of being one giant corporation with all of these drones in this building, each office is its own independent entrepreneur, its own person doing business. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, that's
all
amazing.
for independent business.
Absolutely, 100%. Me too, man. Yeah. Yeah, and if you can do some, Jordan Peterson talks about that a lot. The risk analysis of like staying at a job you hate or going for the job that you would love to do, the one you would prefer to do, the one you would be happy at. Yes, of course, if you there's some planning involved with quitting your job and moving to a pursuit that you're going to be passionate about. Of course, there's going to be risk. There's always risk involved. But
that's the thing. Everyone wanted to. That's of course
Right.
everyone wants to quit that thing.
Right.
Well, the choice was made for them.
Right.
So it's no longer a risk to take. The
Right.
risk got taken for you. So
Yeah.
now what do you have to lose other than pursue what you love?
Right.
And that's one of the fascinating aspects of what's happened to me is I feel like a lot of people are in a better place, at least mentally. But there's a very dark flip side to that for every one person that's in a better place mentally and economically and all of that, there's 10 or 20 more that have had the exact opposite problem.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You can't have the yin without the yang, for sure. That is the Tao of things. But yeah, like I said, there's a risk with, like you said, of course, during the pandemic, a lot of the risk was taken away for a lot of people because it was just like either pursue your fucking passions or you're just not going to do shit because there's nothing else
might as
to
well
do.
try.
Yeah, you might as well give it a shot,
Yeah.
But it's almost more risky to stay at a job that you are miserable at, because if a job that you're miserable at, you're going to age 10 years in 5, like it's going to slowly kill you.
And if
quickly.
anything in my past, if there's a bad habit that I have, it's that I will leave a job before I'm exactly secure in another if it bothers me enough. Like if I could do the math that I've got the money in the bank to handle rent for the next couple months, then I'm not sticking around because to me, this is me personally, it might not be that big of a deal to someone else, but for me, working a job you hate is the most poisonous thing for me.
Absolutely. I would agree with that 1000% because I'm very much the same. I would classically just pick up and be like, you know what? I'm not fucking doing this anymore. Like this
I can't one more day.
Yeah. This is killing my soul.
Yeah.
This is absolutely crushing my soul. And
I've walked away from some good jobs under that mentality.
Oh yeah.
Because it's not about the money to me. It's
no.
I don't care how much you're paying me. If I'm dreading going to sleep,
yes, that
because I know I have to wake up and do something I hate. If my first feeling upon waking is stomach churning dread, which going back to what I said, when you first come into consciousness, you are in a hypersuggestible state of hypnosis.
Right.
So your first suggestions to yourself for the day are dreadful, literally dreadful.
Yeah, I tell people that all the time. I'm like, if you tell yourself you're going to have a shitty day, you're going to have a shitty day. Like you've already predisposed yourself to having a shitty day at that point. Like, well, today's going to suck. Well, yeah, you just pretty much made sure of that because you put that idea in your head early in the day when you're apparently easily suggestible.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's, I tell people, be very careful what you think and what you expose yourself to in those moments. And because it can determine your next day. Absolutely.
Right.
If your suggestions before going to bed are negative, that's going to influence your day. And especially if your suggestions to yourself are negative upon waking, that absolutely will. One of the things I'm really big on that I talk to my clients about is something called self-talk or body talk. Those are a little different. Self-talk is any negative self-talk. Right. Like, I suck, I can't do this. Oh, you know me, I'm a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
And the body talk is things like pain in the ass, pain in the back, or pain in my neck. It's translating emotional pain to your body.
Right.
And that can have detrimental effects. So I'm very big, and this has benefited me personally, on making sure that anything you say to yourself about yourself is positive. No matter how frustrated with yourself you are, always make sure that it's positive.
Right.
Like, and it's hard sometimes,
Yeah, for sure.
but you have to find a way to reframe it. And you'll find as you reframe it, while it takes effort the first dozen or so times, it just starts to go by rote after a while.
Right.
That you naturally stop yourself whenever you start speaking negatively about yourself.
Yeah. 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 I'm pretty terrible about that. Even I'm very cognizant of myself doing it. Like I meditate a lot and I have a pretty good insight meditation practice. And, I'm very, very much, inquisitive about myself and my tendencies. And so like, I can watch myself doing it and be cognizant. And like, I've gotten better at catching myself, but I'm still not 100% by any means. Like I still find myself
Neither am I.
fucking stupid ass. Like, I'll do something that, was not to my performance standard. And fucking
Well, and I guess the more accurate way to put the self-talk thing is don't say anything to yourself you wouldn't say to your best friend or your wife.
Right.
Because you should hold yourself in the same respect and same regard you hold those people.
Right.
At least. So that's the big thing. Think about oftentimes how you speak to yourself, that if somebody spoke to you or if you spoke to somebody that way, how would that come across?
Right.
Like, and it, or at least for me personally, that started very much changing the way that I spoke to myself about myself. And it's very much changed my outlook. It's changed my, not just on myself, but my outlook on other people. And part of that is the school of hypnotherapy that I come from, both literally and figuratively, has a system of suggestibility and behavior called the ENP system, which kind of defines everyone on this spectrum. And understanding where you fall on that and what that means in terms of the way you process information and the way that you behave and interact with others, as well as not just that, but the other types, what the other things are, because that helps you understand other people better. A good example of this is, so I've been very antisocial my whole life. Hated going to parties, loved getting drunk and smoking a joint in the corner, but hated being around people. And I always thought I was weird for that.
Right.
I thought there was something antisocial and wrong with me. And I never really liked to be around people. Even in my relationships, I tended to want to stay at home more. And I just thought I was just antisocial. Well, I learned this system. And I hear them, because ENP stands for emotional and physical. I hear them start giving the traits of a high emotional. And they're basically talking about me.
Right.
And everything about myself that I previously thought was strange, they're just laying out as normal behavior to be expected from a high emotional male. And that was kind of a dawning realization to me, because we're not given an instruction manual about the way we think or the way we feel.
Yeah.
We barely know what's going on with our body.
Right.
So like, we don't know that our thoughts could be normal, that what we think are these intrusive, abnormal thoughts and behaviors.
It's just normal human behavior.
Yeah. It's just definable of where you land on that scale. Right. And on the other end of that, I personally never understood watching these people who could go be in crowds of people and talk to people they've never talked to before and just be social and happy about it. And I never got that.
Right.
Now I learned that that's a high physical. That's somebody that's very much on the physical end.
Okay.
And knowing that, I understand it, because I know now I'm not strange and you're not strange. We're just these two
Right.
definable
Yeah.
things.
Just different. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I have a question. So you said you're on the high emotional side of the
Uh-huh.
scale, right? So what would some of the traits of that be for a high emotional male? Because out of all the shit you're saying, I'm like, this dude's talking about me for sure. Like I'm the same. I'm the exact
Well-
same, man. Like I was that guy just hanging in the corner. Like I didn't want to socialize. Like I used to be a touring musician, and I'd get up and, I'd play in front of a crowd full of people. And then, I'd hang out to watch the other bands and stuff, but I'd be sitting in the corner by myself. You know what I'm saying?
You
Like
wanted the accolade of attention, but you wanted none of the social aspect of it.
right.
That's one of the traits of an emotional, by the way.
I
so-
knew it. I fucking knew it.
I'll kind of start from the beginning.
Yes, please.
So I said there's two different types.
Mhm.
Start with suggestibility. Suggestibility is a bit more of a spectrum. And in terms of suggestibility, we'll say that there's 4 basic types. So you have your physicals, which in terms of suggestibility, which is basically the language that I use to hypnotize you. Those are people that you must use literal wording with. You must describe things to a T. Tell them where they're going and what they're doing. On the other end of that, you have the emotionals, who are most definable by their control issues. And that if you tell an emotional, your eyes are feeling heavy, their first reaction is going to be, no, they're not. And you've just immediately lost the session.
Right.
But if you tell that same person, if you use inference and you say, you may begin to feel your eyes getting heavy. If that starts to happen, feel free to let them close. Where it's not your eyes are getting heavy, close them.
Right.
It's their decision.
Right. It's not like a direct order. Yeah.
Exactly. And metaphor works better for them. In between those, you have one of the more interesting types, which is the reason stage hypnosis even exists. Those are somnambulists. They hit into a certain degree of 50-50 on the E&P scale. And they are the most hypnotically suggestible portion of the population.
Why is that?
As to why that is, I can't really answer that. But these people either walk around in trance. That's why they're referred to as somnambulists.
Right.
Somnambulist means sleepwalker.
Yeah.
Or can be easily overwhelmed and put into trance, into that hypersuggestible state. That also means they can more easily be put into sympathetic nervous system response, fight or flight.
Right.
Because hypnosis and the sympathetic nervous response are very close. And these, if there was ever a people that advertising and media targeted, it was the somnambulists, because you can just basically implant things in their head.
Right.
And it's very important that my clients who are somnambulistic, that I teach them what this is, what they can do to protect themselves, how they can get themselves out of trance, and how they can kind of focus more on being present. And at the other end of that, kind of, you have what I am. It's the last suggestibility type. It's the high emos, or what's referred to as an intellectual. There are people that that score 80 or above on the emo scale. You have to hypnotize them differently. You cannot just induce them at first. You basically have to trick their subconscious into believing it's their idea. And
Interesting.
it's very definable by antisocial behavior, a tendency to want to control things, to focus on things. And it's interesting, being that, because it's probably the most uncommon suggestibility type. And I experience hypnosis very different than than a lot of the other types can. And I've spoken to other people who are similar in suggestibility to me,
Mhm.
and they kind of say the same thing. And that I don't get much visualization. I know some high physicals that can smell, taste, see, hear. I can literally take them somewhere.
Right.
And I don't get that. I get how to describe this. I get a lot of excuse me. I get a lot of physical sensation.
Hmm.
Like if you tell me to imagine myself walking down a stairwell, I will actually feel in my feet like I'm walking down a stairwell.
Interesting.
But other than that, it's just kind of my mind simultaneously drifts and runs a mile a minute
Mhm.
because that is your conscious mind that's floating around there, spazzing out.
Right.
And I always have people ask me, like, when I was hypnotized, I couldn't stop thinking. Does that mean it wasn't working? I'm like, no, that's fine. I wasn't talking to that. I wasn't talking to you, that part of you. I was speaking to your subconscious mind,
Hmm.
which is very different. One of the things that's repeated in hypnosis is go with the sound of my voice, though you may hear it or may not hear it. The part of you that needs to hear my voice will take it with them. And that's very much true. Your subconscious is listening. Your subconscious is always listening to everything around you.
Mhm.
And in that moment in hypnosis, it's focused in on the voice of the hypnotist and following along with it. So that's suggestibility. Then you also move to behavior, which is where you start having traits, not just suggestibility. And like I said, physicals, people that rank towards the physical end are going to be more social. They're going to value physical relationships more. To a physical, sex is an expression of love. It's a validation. And there's a trick to that because on the flip side to that, you have the emotional, who's to them sex is not an expression of love or the relationship. And that's where a lot of problems start because an emotional who tends to be kind of distant, they tend to value their privacy more and be away from people more and like more intimate one-on-one type situations more. To them, the expression of love in the relationship is more about the cerebral, that mental connection, existing as a pair. Well, that emotional's not that interested in sex. And after a while, the physical, and I've seen this happen in my own relationships, the physical, who to them, if they cut off sexual attention to somebody, means they're rejecting that person, begins to feel rejected. And where I come in these situations is I just let the physical partner know that, hey, you're a high physical, your partner's a high emo. They don't view sex as a validation of this relationship, and they aren't rejecting you by not being as interested as you are.
Right.
And on the other side, you talk to the emotional and let them know that your partner's a high physical. To them, that physical affection is how they validate their love. So maybe try to be a little more physically affectionate with them. So it's understanding on both sides because we both have different needs.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. So what are like some of the other traits of the high emotional scale?
Generally very creative. I've never met a high emo that was not specialized in something, either a musician, an artist, an accountant, something very, very specialized. Antisocial behavior is one of the big ones. And sometimes you'll encounter problems because something happens that's called an incongruence, where somebody who is, say, an emo is in a position either culturally or professionally or socially, where they are forced to either take away some of their emo traits or fake phys traits. And more often than not, it's the faking traits that pops up. And the only problem with that is subconsciously other people know. Um, Most times when you've met somebody that's like, that person's really obviously faking their shit.
Right. I'm trying way too
Usually
hard.
an emo trying to be a fizz. Like, that's usually what it is because it's such an obvious weird thing.
Right. That's strange.
Yeah, it really is. This is
You know, like it's so weird.
easily the strangest, most fascinating thing I've ever done in my life.
No, for sure.
And I've,
It's definitely more fascinating than being a line cook. Trust me, I've been a line cook a lot.
I mean, it's,
Not that that's not fun sometimes.
I about to say I'm thankful for it. One, because I met someone very special to me,
Right.
and I had cooked before, but that was the job that taught me, like, no, you can really cook. Like,
Yeah.
you can actually make really good food.
Yeah, for sure.
And it kind of made me fall in love with that a little bit.
Right.
Previous to that, I just kind of cooked for fun and necessity. But after that, like, I discovered that I could make food for myself and the people close to me that was better than the things that you could go out and buy.
Right.
So,
Yeah. And see, that's
gave me
what
a new
I
hobby.
enjoy. That's what I enjoy. I enjoy putting that time and effort into cooking for the people I care about. You know, like if it's
Yeah.
my friends and family, like I love it. Like I absolutely love it. That feeling of just like, man, I'm fucking doing it, you know, and like really getting in there and like putting together some fucking fantastic dish. That feels good.
You know what you're making is going to be special to them.
Now, see, I could do the same thing in a work setting and not get the same amount of fulfillment from it. You know what I mean? Like,
But here's the thing.
I think it's because
And
I care about the people that I'm making it for. I think it's because it's so personal to me, and I'm like, they're going to, you know, derive enjoyment from this. Whereas, you know, the average Joe that's coming to a restaurant, yeah, he's going to enjoy it, but he's not going to enjoy it as much as, you know, like, oh, my friend made this food. You know what I mean?
Exactly. I would argue also a lot of that has to do with wage. It's real hard to get enthused for $15 an hour.
Yeah.
If you were paid appropriately, yeah, you could take pride in your work then.
Right.
And it's,
yeah, I think
that's one of those things I've ranted about often.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think, yeah, once you get into a low wage position like that, where it's just grind, I think you build up a lot of resentment, and then that, you know, that's absolutely just poison for you. Holding a resentment is just absolutely like one of the worst things you can do.
Well, because that starts to lead to, I argue that minimum wage and low wages are bad for your mental health.
Oh, 100%.
Because it's not just on the survivability of it, but think about it. You're being told
that's what you're worth. That's what you're
pocket
worth.
Change.
Right.
Yeah.
You derive your self-worth from the wage that you make. Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And
a way to reinforce that you're the lowest level of society, you know, like it's very,
and I know that feeling.
Yeah, me too.
I think
a lot of people that listen to the show probably know that feeling.
Yeah. And if anyone's listening out here that knows that feeling, the only thing I can really say is do something. Do whatever you are passionate about if you possibly can. Because nobody out there is going to pay you what you know you're worth.
Yeah.
Because everyone out there is there to cheap you. You know what you're worth. You know what your time is worth. And it's very important, I feel, if you're able to pursue that. And I understand that there are people in positions in life that can't just stop their job and go somewhere else.
Right.
And I absolutely sympathize with that because I've also been in that position. But if anyone is in the position that they can, if you want to make jewelry, if there is something you want to pursue, wages are so low right now. There is no reason for you not to try. And even if it's setting something aside while you still are working full time, just to try to get something else a little bit going.
Yeah.
Do that. My generation, pardon me while I'm a bad hypnotherapist and roll a cigarette. Uh, part of the problem, I'm gonna wax a little philosophical here.
Oh, feel free.
With I don't know, how old are you?
I am 40 years old.
Okay, so we're the same age. I'm 38. So part of the problem with our generation is we were the last ones sold the lie. If you go to college and do what you're supposed to do, you get the wife in the house with the white picket fence, and
Right. The 2.3
kids,
children. Yeah.
and you make it. It's just, if you
And-
work hard.
Yeah. And that is the model of success.
Exactly. And that's
Right.
that's how you make it. That's the model of the American dream.
Yep.
I don't know anyone that got that. And I certainly didn't. No one I know did. And our generation is in this weird position that we went enthusiastically into young adulthood believing that things were going to go a certain way because our parents raised us that that's the way the system worked. And I've met plenty of people with bachelor's degrees working at Subway,
Oh, yeah.
and it's such a bizarre thing. And it's at the point now that I was looking at job listings the other day, because that's always a curious thing to me.
Oh, yeah. It's fun.
And I was literally finding jobs that required a master's or PhD that started at $16 an hour.
What a slap in the fucking face, you know? Like, really?
Jesus Christ.
I just spent
And that's where we've
8
come
years of
to.
my life, you know, pursuing a
Busting
a
ass.
doctorate. Yeah, I wrote this fucking dissertation. It took me 2 years
Yeah.
to write, and now I'm $16 an hour, and they're trying to get $15 for fast food workers. Like,
Yeah.
what's the fucking point?
Exactly.
What's the point anymore?
And that's kind of the problem. And it's
How do we get past that problem? You know, like that's the big question.
That's-
Like, and can we? You know, other than taking, doing exactly what we've been talking about, and just taking control of your own life and taking the reins and saying, I'm not going to fucking put up with this shit anymore. I'm going to fucking do my own thing, and I'm going to fucking win at it. I'm going to be successful at it because there's no other fucking choice anymore.
Nobody's going to pay you what you deserve.
Right.
And we live in a very unusual time right now because the internet's a hell of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
The internet's how I do my job. I am 99% remote. I work over Zoom. And that I could not do that in my little town. So there's so many different ways to make money online, as long as you're not making it for someone else.
Yeah.
You've heard that old saying, boss makes $1, I make a dime. Like,
I mean,
fuck that. Like,
no, fuck that for sure. Yeah, fuck that. I couldn't have said that better myself. Yeah, fuck that. And that's my thing. That's what has driven me to all the creative pursuits that I've been doing. I wrote for the newspaper for a while and a couple magazines. I was just a journalist, like a freelance journalist, because obviously I'm not going to saddle myself under a contract anywhere. So I was a freelance journalist. I was a traveling musician. Now I'm trying to put my efforts into doing this podcast and trying to eventually, hopefully, be able to monetize this in some way and do this, because I got fucking sick of going to work every day and fucking hating my life. And, meanwhile, I'm, the restaurant's turning a great profit, but I'm not, I'm barely able to pay my fucking bills. And then at the end of the day, I don't have time to do fucking anything, like I'm spending all of my time, which is the most valuable thing to me, is my time, because it's the only thing I can't make any more of. I can make all the money in the world. I can make, I can do all these things, but I'll never get more time. So that's what drove me to all of my pursuits. Was like, and I'm just a fucking, I have problems with authority. Let's be realistic. I have issues with authority.
So do I.
I don't like fucking people telling me what to do.
That's emo shit. But yeah, I absolutely get that. And I've got a weird mentality. I would absolutely bust my ass for somebody loyally who is paying me a good wage.
Mm.
And I look back at the past a lot. And back in the day, the minimum wage was I think when they established it was $2.30.
Right.
At that time, that was the equivalent of like $28 right now an hour.
Right.
I actually keep in my desk drawer a little pouch of old silver coins, American coins, just to kind of remind me. It's, I think, a handful, probably $4 worth of change. It's like $60 worth of silver now.
Right.
And can you imagine the world we'd live in if minimum wage, the minimum you could make was like $30 an hour nearly?
Right.
Like, and that was beginning. And a bagger back in the 50s or 60s made the equivalent of $120,000 a year.
Jeez.
And yes.
Oh man, that really puts things into perspective, you know.
Yes.
It's like we've seen the cost of living increase so dramatically, and then the wage increase has not been commensurate with it. You know, it's.
I came from a state where the minimum wage was $7.25 an hour.
Right.
There is no way working every humanly hour possible you can even pay rent.
Yeah. No.
Like,
I'm in Florida, and I think it's still like $8 and something per hour here. You know, like we're talking about less than $9 an hour. You know, like
that's why all of this,
you can't even get a
$15 minimum wage.
You can't even get a 1-bedroom apartment for less than $1,000 anymore. You know, like how are you supposed to survive? Oh wait, you can't. You know, hope you like having fucking roommates.
$15 minimum wage argument for so long that it doesn't need to be $15 anymore. It needs to be twice that.
Right. No, seriously. Yeah, we've been beating that fucking dead horse for a while. It's like, yeah, we've been beating it for so long that it's no longer even relevant. Let's up that number. That's crazy to me, man.
And it's insane how I looked into getting a bicycle recently because I live out in the country and I thought, hey, riding a trail would be fun. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you've priced a new bicycle lately, but you might as well be buying a used motorcycle.
Right.
Like,
yeah, if you want a decent bike, yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy, man.
And it's so weird.
Well, I had a nice bike. Somebody stole it.
It happens.
Yeah. You know, shit happens. They must
have
have
a lot of
more
clients that they struggle with the way the world is. And that ends up through examination being a lot of the core of their problem is this frustration.
Right.
That I work with a lot of people from our generation, and that frustration always comes up at some level that they feel like not necessarily they're owed more, but they're owed something different.
Just cheated. That's how I would say. We've been fucking cheated, man.
Yeah.
Man, we're fed this narrative the entire time we're growing up. And yeah, you know, these are the things that you do. These are the benchmarks of success. And then they're made completely unattainable for our generation.
Yes. And at this point, like I tell everyone that possibly can, do your own thing. It's at the point in society that it's such an unlivable thing that, like I said, the risk was taken for you.
Yeah.
Why not pursue what you love? If there's something you're good at, if you can draw, if you can paint, if you can sing, no matter what it is, in the day and age we live in, take that chance, even if it's a small thing at first. This is okay. Not to be the Grim Reaper, but we'll be realistic here because that's a very important part of what I do.
Right.
The world is going somewhere very bad. And it's about to be a very depressing place, more so than it is already. And in that, it is all the more important that you find something that makes you happy, something that you can sustain yourself doing. Because I don't know if you've looked outside lately. Things are fucking weird.
Oh yeah, for sure.
We
Super
got.
weird.
I mean, I'm a big fan of saying I'm not even religious, but shit's looking pretty biblical right now
Yeah.
because we've got plagues. One side of the country's on fire every year. One side of the country's underwater every year. The middle of the country gets frozen. We'll see if that happens this year. I hope not, though the snow was neat. And it's there's going to come a time, and again, not to sound like the Grim Reaper, but realism does come to bear here, that the world is going to get very difficult and even stranger than it is right now. And it's very important that we seek out things like family and friends and the things that make us happy.
Right.
And I'm not sitting here saying that, oh, the apocalypse is coming. We'll make it through it. We always make it through it. But it's important to maintain your mental health in this time because it might be difficult. And and more than your mental health. And I can't stress this enough because I believe this is one of the things that has come to be wrong with society. Care about your neighbor's mental health. Care about the people around you. Like, look after your neighbor. Look after those in your community. I think that one of the things most wrong with society today is that we've become so detached from each other, from the concept of community. I live in a small town and no one talks to each other outside of the weird cliques.
Yeah.
And that's weird. I should know everyone's name. And thinking back to my childhood, like, because I grew up in the suburbs, like, all the neighbors knew each other.
Right.
Like, everyone talked, everyone, if not liked each other, was at least friendly and supported each other. And I'm sure there's places like that still. And if you live in a place like that, awesome. I'm jealous.
Yeah, for sure.
But
Places like that even exist anymore? I don't even know.
I don't know. I have yet to see it. I'm sure somebody listening right now knows about that. But this is one of...
Yeah, if anybody does know about that, send me an email.
yeah, for real. Let me know where to go.
Yeah.
But one of the things that's so important, I feel, about what I do is there is a game being played that it's being played by the media. It's being played by advertisement, marketing, religion, politics. All of these things utilize this system in your brain of trance and hypersuggestibility. That is how you are marketed to.
Oh, man.
And it's very important that you learn the rules to this game. Right. And most people don't even know we're playing it. And once you become aware of all of these rules of trance and hypnosis and how they work into your day-to-day life, it becomes easier to safeguard against them. Once you know the game, you know the rules, and you can actively both play it and use it to your advantage. And a simple example of this is look at the news. When the news comes on, look at a news intro.
I'd rather not.
Very bright and flashy and loud and shocking.
Right. Yeah.
And the way that you induce hypersuggestibility is through what we call an overload of message units. Things like bright colors, noises, sudden flashes, things like that. Anything that overloads the sensory of your brain.
Okay.
So that's why commercials are the way they are.
Right.
Advertisement is set up the way it is. And it starts to be interesting because once you know these things and the way they work, you start observing these things objectively. And it becomes all the more blatantly obvious.
Right. I can't remember the guy's name off the top of my head, but like the father of modern advertising was like
Oh, I
Sigmund
know who you're talking
Freud's.
about.
Yeah, Sigmund Freud's nephew. It's like, well, it's kind of telling, you know. Like,
Well, look at Facebook.
oh man, just like
Facebook was made to utilize the dopamine response.
yeah, and it's doing a really good job. That place is a
Yeah.
fucking nightmare lately. I don't even. I really only get on Facebook anymore, just really to just book for the podcast. That's about the extent of my enjoyment of Facebook. There's so much division going on right now with people. It's just grotesque.
And it's bizarre to me, and it makes me just want to like scream into a megaphone from a soapbox, because there's all of these divisions. And I'm going to say a contentious thing right now. No one's talking about hauling Bezos in to make him accountable for those unpaid taxes.
Right.
No one's talking about who the actual enemy is. We're talking about all of these things, left and right, black and white,
Vaccinated, unvaccinated,
vaxxed and unvaxxed,
Yeah.
all of these artificial divisions, when it's all just the wealthy pissing all over the poor and watching it and laughing.
Yeah,
And that's where the real division is.
for sure.
And it's an intentional thing to
Yeah.
keep people so divided.
Right. The
Because
wealthy
as long
play.
as we're divided,
Right. The
it's
wealthy
amongst
play
ourselves.
identity politics to keep the lower class at each other's throats, so they're not paying
Yes.
attention to what's really fucking going on. I tell people that all the time, and they're like, "Oh, you're conspiracy theorists." Like, nah, not really. I just fucking pay attention to things.
There's no conspiracy about it.
Like, how are you not seeing this, man? Like, oh wait, you're too busy arguing with your friends, or they used to be your friends. I guess probably never. Yeah, man, I've had people like delete me just for, off of Facebook or whatever, which is insignificant. I don't give a shit. But like, the point is, like, I've had people that I've been close to delete me for just not sharing their opinion. Like, not even necessarily disagreeing with their opinion, but just not agreeing with their opinion. Like, if I'm not on your side, then I'm your enemy. It's like, we can have differences and still be fucking acquaintances or friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, and I remember growing up, it was always the thing. You don't talk about religion and politics in polite company. And now that's all that is.
That's all we talk about.
That's all there is now. And, they were right. You really shouldn't talk about those things in polite company. Partially because it turns out that some people are just a piece of shit. And it's just thinly veiled. Like,
yeah. People's true colors really start coming out. It's fucked up, man.
Yeah. And that's the weird thing. And I have notions as to why that is. This is because there's people out there saying things that's like, that's not true. Like, I could prove that to be not true on an Etch-a-Sketch. And they believe it to the point of fanaticism. And the only possible thing I could think to that is hypnotic suggestion. That you had this idea, this association planted in your head that this set of people is evil. Which
Right.
is why, if you start paying attention to like the news and seeing the phraseology that they use, that the words that they use subtly to describe things, you start to notice the game. You see what they're trying to do.
Neuro-linguistic programming.
Exactly. Funny part about NLP, this has come up a bunch of times. Bandler and what was the other guy's name? Not Griffin. But Bandler and his partner got the concepts of neuro-linguistic programming by observing Milton Erickson, who is basically the grandfather of modern hypnotherapy. So NLP is, by all definitions of the word, simply bootstrap hypnosis. And it's interesting in that, because every hypnotherapist I know uses NLP, because we're all trained as to where NLP came from. But not every NLP practitioner utilizes hypnosis because they are completely unaware that this process was born from observing one of the most interesting hypnotherapists at work.
Right.
And Milton Erickson was an exceedingly interesting man. I have a few of his books, and he founded some form of hypnosis that's very interesting because it doesn't look like hypnosis. He started something called conversational hypnosis. He could actually do hypnotic inductions with a handshake. And because of that, towards the end of his life, no one would shake this old man's hand.
Oh, that's funny.
So it's interesting. NLP is very interesting. For those of you listening who don't know neurolinguistic programming, the best way I can define it is being aware of your thoughts and actions. It is being mindful of, much as I was talking about earlier with self-talk, being mindful of the way that you talk to yourself, being mindful of your thoughts. The most classic example of NLP at play is if you are nervous about public speaking, just picture everyone in their underwear and you'll be fine. That's nothing but mindset. That's NLP. The person that taught me NLP, the story that he said, because he was a neurotic little man, is that he was crossing the road and there was a car beside him, and he started getting worked up. It's like, man, these guys are staring at me. They're thinking bad things. They might do bad things, like getting worked up in his head.
Right.
And he stopped himself, and I forget what he said. He actively pictured these guys doing something ridiculous. And he did that, and the feeling of dread went away, and he crossed the street. And he said after he crossed the street, he looked back just out of curiosity to see what these guys were actually doing. They were just on their phone. Like, they weren't looking at him. They weren't thinking about him. That saying that you are your own worst enemy.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Very much true. Absolutely true. And that's why I view hypnosis and hypnotherapy as such an important thing, because it allows you to get control over that.
Right.
It allows you to kind of rein in your own thoughts and your own perspectives about yourself and the world around you. And for speaking me personally and my peers and my clients, who are really the only people I can speak for, it has been life-changing. Much in the way that NLP has been life-changing for a good deal of people. I have a few clients that came to hypnotherapy through NLP, and they're easy clients to work with because they already know half of what I'm working with. It's just using that to guide their thoughts to where they need to be.
Right. Yeah. That makes me think just talking about how, being your own worst enemy, and, just being so open to suggestion, and really, your thoughts become your reality. It reminds me of I think it's the very first verse, I would say, in the Dhammapada. And that's, I believe it goes, mind precedes all mental states. Mind is their chief. They are all mind wrought. If with an impure mind, a person speaks or acts, suffering follows him like the wheel that follows the foot of the ox. So suffering is mind made. All suffering is self-created. You basically get to choose whether you suffer or not. And, a lot of times we choose to suffer because we've got just shitty programming. Like the human brain is just not designed very well in some aspects. Some aspects is designed very well, and other aspects, it needs a little work.
I don't think it's a design flaw with our minds. I think it's a
programming issue
flaw with society.
Right.
We are not made
to
exist the way that we exist.
For sure. Yeah. I'd agree with that.
And there's a lot of weird disconnect with people with that, I believe. Because, in the end, we are one of the most survivable creatures on the planet. We were made to survive and thrive and pursue. And now we're in an apartment watching Netflix and being paid barely enough to eat. And we still have that part of us that needs to feel engaged.
Right. Have
One of the times in my life,
meaningful life experiences.
yes,
And I think people lack that. And
um,
spirituality. I think that's a, like if
yeah,
for a healthy mind, I think if you want to have a healthy mind, you have to have a connection between the mind, the body, and the spirit. I think all of those things need to be in a level of
yes.
fitness. And if any one of them is lacking, all the other areas will suffer.
And I tell people, because a lot of people have a bad taste in their mouth about spirituality and religion. And the way I explain it to people is you don't have to think about God or anything higher. All you have to do is think about why. All you have to do is think abstract thoughts. And in that abstraction, simply explore. Be
Mhm.
curious. Explore the why of why you are the way you are. Why we're here. What it means to be here. What
Yeah,
it means
just
to be you.
deep philosophical inquiry.
Exactly. And that's nothing that is spiritualism, because
Yeah.
that's connecting with a deeper thought in yourself. And that's all that you have to do. And I've met people that have never had a thought like that, like an existential thought in their life.
It's so,
And
so bizarre. I've met people like
that
that
is
too, and it's just so fucking bizarre to me. I just don't even. I've
like,
always
how
been
can you not
I've always been a
think of,
pretty deep thinker. Yeah. How can you not think of that?
yeah,
The fact that you could not think about the fact that someone has never had thoughts like that is just so completely foreign to me, because I've always
like,
been such a deep thinker in those levels.
I'm the type of person that I'll just pause something or stop reading a book to just sit there and absorb that information.
Mhm.
Like, I remember the first time I learned about what a blue giant star was, or like a super mega black hole.
Right.
Like, just the concept of size and totality, and just unfathomable spans of space and time and existence. And what does that even mean for me? What
Yeah.
does that even mean for us? And what do I mean in my conscious awareness compared to this literal galaxy eating sized unfathomable void?
Right.
And
Looking at stuff like that, looking at the vastness of the universe and the inescapable void and, the supermassive black holes, it can make you feel very insignificant. It can make you feel
I actually have a hypnotic journey
okay.
very similar to this that I take people through. I have warnings about it because it's a little scary, but to me, that insignificance is what makes life special. Because think about that. Think about just how small you are compared to the vastness of everything. But you're here and you're aware,
Right.
and you're experiencing and thinking and feeling. So it doesn't matter that you are an atom compared to the vastness of the universe. You're here, and that's special. That for a brief moment in time, your consciousness became aware on this small little rock, whatever consciousness may mean. And here you are, experiencing things and getting hangovers and stepping on tacks.
Yeah, for sure. all the things, all the joys and all the suffering.
Yeah.
It's important to note, like, I think too, and this is just one thing I've pondered is like, yeah, in the vastness of the universe, in the vastness of however many other fucking universes there are out there, the infinite number of possibly somewhat similar, very similar, exactly alike, except for one small detail, multiverse type universe. It's like, yeah, it's really easy to feel insignificant, but you have to remember that exactly like you said, you are here and you are a node in the network of the universe and you are an integral part of the machine. No matter how insignificant you fucking feel at any given time, you are here for some sort of reason. I mean, causes and conditions, but you're here for something. And, it's up to you to figure out what that reason is.
And I do a lot of work with people on exploring that reason, on helping them find their purpose of why they're here, because your subconscious kind of knows. There's just some conscious resistance to it. And when people are able to see that and acknowledge that, that's when that moment comes. That's when that pursuit of the things they love comes.
Right.
And because that's when the alternative becomes intolerable, because you just can't conceive of doing anything but experiencing positivity.
Right.
And I do realize that there are people out there that's simply not an option. But there's always positivity to be found. I've been in some very, very, very dark places in life.
Oh yeah.
And I was always the asshole that kept smiling and kept cracking jokes, no matter how bad things got.
Right.
I
mean, that's like a coping mechanism almost.
Pretty much.
Yeah. I mean, that's how I am. Like if, shit gets up, I'm still going to try to keep some level. I'll just, even if it's just sarcasm and, just dry wit sarcasm, I've got to do something to help me get through this tedious time.
Exactly. And to me, I don't know if I guess it would be a coping mechanism, but to me, it's also an effort. The times I've used my humor in those dark times have been an effort to support those around me and to keep the other people around me from despairing.
Right.
Because not everyone has that ability to smile on the gallows.
Yeah.
I've had friends say many times to me in the past, man, if you got executed, you'd tell a dick joke to your hangman. I was like, yeah, probably.
Yeah, for sure.
But,
and why wouldn't you?
Exactly.
You want to make sure it's the best dick joke you've ever fucking told, though. This is going to be the last one.
But it's funny. Life is a strange thing.
It's the strangest thing.
It is the strangest thing that you can remember.
This incarnation, this human consciousness thing that we're all experiencing is like the most psychedelic fucking thing ever. Yeah. If you really get right down to this is the craziest shit you could ever do. It's like we won the incarnation lottery. It's like, look, man, you know how many people there are, and like, you know how many other things you could have been incarnated as. Like you basically just won the lottery. Like you get to experience being a human and all of its highs and lows and joys and sorrows. And that's fucking cool, man.
Aware of it and be aware that you're human and what that means.
Yes.
And that's, I've watched something one time that talked about how humanity is in a unique position because we are the only animal that is both aware of its own existence in the universe and of its own death.
Yeah.
And
I've talked about that recently a lot with a few people.
Yeah. And some people really suffer with that notion. Some people, that's why you see people that turn to things like fanatical religion, or the people that are so all about a sports team that it seems like a religion. Right. These identifying things to desperately cling to something.
You know what else I've noticed? In the same vein, hoarding. Hoarding is people's attempt to make sure that everyone else knows that they existed. It's like, no, I existed. I've got all this shit. This proves I existed.
And it's interesting that that's a thing because in the end, Alexander the Great, arguably one of the greatest humans who have ever existed for the short period of time that he did, will be forgotten. Like, everyone will be forgotten. There might come a day that all of this planet and all of its history are forgotten. Like,
on a long enough timeline, everybody's going to be forgotten.
Yeah. And that's part of the thing, is on a long enough timeline, things stop. I watched this thing that talked about an extended enough timeline, the Milky Way and Andromeda galaxy merge.
Oh yeah.
And there is not a single star in the sky because everything has become so distant that we are literally alone in a void. And those are kind of depressing, kind of panic-inducing thoughts.
I mean,
But
I think it'd be depressing and panic inducing if it was going to happen tomorrow, but it's not.
yeah, but even then, like
Those
to
thoughts
me,
fascinate me. You know, like
that's the thing. It's fascinating, and if Alexander the Great bears no hope of remembrance,
right. What chance do we have?
like what chance do we have? Even like I don't know. Let's see. Who was president of India in 1972? That was a wildly important man to billions of people. Why wouldn't you know that? But I don't fucking know that.
Right.
And it's that perspective of to some people he did matter, and to some
Right.
people you matter,
Right.
and that's really all you can bank on. Is that so many billions of people have been remembered and forgotten, and the people that have remembered and forgotten them have been remembered and forgotten. And there's a peace to be had in that, because to fear being forgotten, to fear the eventual happenings of the universe and things like that, there's no point. It denies the divinity of the present,
Right.
the
divinity
sheer
of
luck of the draw,
the human.
that you're here now.
Yeah, of the human
And
existence itself. You're taking away. You're
Yeah.
you're stealing your own joy by obsessing about
exactly.
things that are completely out of your control. You know, it's
And
like in Buddhism, there's what they call the three marks of existence, and that's that it's imperfect, impersonal, and impermanent. You know, everything has an expiration on it.
Exactly.
This microphone I'm talking to you on right now, this thing was broken before I got it. You know what I mean? Like everything is going to decay at some point. Even the universe itself will end at some point. Everything is impermanent. So we just enjoy the fucking ride, right?
To me, if you want to worry about strange existential things, there's so much more positive things you could think about. Like, why are you here?
Right.
What does here even mean? What does you even mean?
Yeah.
And like, it's, to me, you have so much to work with in the present. And I understand depression, and I understand being sad. And because like I said, I've been to bad places.
Yeah. I mean, you're a highly emotional person. I'm sure you do understand depression very well. I would say that and this is just speculation on my part. I would say that the people that gravitate towards the high emotional scale probably suffer from depression more than the high physical.
Yep. Or it's a different type of depression. It's a more existential depression. It tends to
that's
be
my
on the
depression.
emo scale.
Existential dread.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. And I used to get a lot of existential dread, because there's some the existence
existentially dreadful shit.
Yeah. And it's hypnotherapy cured a lot of that for me.
That's awesome.
Because one of the things you become more aware of is the totality of you, what that means. And there's a lot in you to explore. And like we were saying, to borrow worry about something that could happen trillions of years from now.
Mm-hmm.
It's insulting to the fact that you are here now. And I have worked with millionaires who were the most depressed person I've ever met. And I have worked with people who were literally dying, who were among the happiest and most content. And it's a strange thing when you see that, because what sense does that make? And there's an experience that I had when I was young that still sticks with me. I used to be an EMS driver. I was working on an ambulance. And as part of that training, we did hospital rotations.
Mm-hmm.
And I was walking around talking to patients, taking my academy notes. I encountered this man in a bed. And I walked up to him and I said, "Hey, man, do you mind if I ask you some questions?" And I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "So why are you here?" And he said, "Oh, I'm dying." I was like, no, like really? And he's like, no, really, I'm going to be dead in 24 hours. That's why I'm here. And I just kind of put up my notepad and I was like, I don't know what to say, man. Are you okay? And he's like, honestly, I'm thrilled. He's apparently he was a staunch atheist, an award-winning mathematician several times over. And to him, he had reached a point in his life that he was done. He had suffered enough. And now, from a scientific standpoint, he was fascinated as to what came next. That it was, to him, it was the grandest experiment to see what happened after we died.
Right.
And that stuck with me for a very long time because there was no fear. If anything, there was a little bit of impatience because he wanted to get this experiment on the road. And that taught me a lot about what this life means, about what you make it and what fear is. And because of that, a lot of my work is with fear. Fear and trauma are probably the two things I work on the most. Because, I don't know, I guess I kind of understand where we come from with that. And I argue that they're the same thing. That you don't become afraid of something unless you're traumatized by it. And you're traumatized by a thing that you're afraid of. So it's this circle. So fear and trauma are kind of different expressions of different parts of the same like cycle.
Right. So, yeah, for sure. That, yeah. I mean, fear can be linked to so many things. Anger is an extension of fear.
Oh, absolutely.
Anxiety is obviously a fear-driven emotion. Depression, I would say, is a fear-driven emotion. Fear that something you've done is going to come back.
Something's not going to work out some way. Or, yeah.
All of those, like, those really intense emotions, like I think they're all pretty much rooted in fear.
Yeah. Hate rooted in fear. Anger rooted in fear.
I was actually talking to a friend of mine about that. We were trying to understand the nature of evil. What is evil, and if there's a way to quantify it? And I was like, well, I mean, evil is based in fear, and it's fear of survival or loss, or it could be any number of things. But yeah, it's all just rooted in fear.
If evil's a tricky thing to define, and for many years of my life, I was very much the shades of gray guy. There's no such thing as innocence, only degrees of guilt.
Right.
And as I've grown older and wiser, hopefully, that's the hope. I've kind of come to realize that there is evil. We see it every day. And what evil is quantifiably is selfishness, be it personal or for your ethno group, right, or for your country.
Yeah.
It is denying your brother's equal share, because right, we're all fucking human. We all have the same experiences. I work with people from all over the world, all different cultures and backgrounds. I have a very challenging schedule sometimes, but I get to know these people who are on the outside wildly different than me. But when we start discussing their problems and who they are subconsciously, we're the exact damn same. Right. We're afraid of the same things. We want the same things. And it's that weird basic fear of the other. It's that unknown. They don't look like us or talk like us or act like us.
Right. And, I think I came down to the solution that fear is, basically the ego, and the ego is the expression of the illusion of separateness. When, when indeed we're not separate at all. Like, we're all the same being, essentially living a different experience. We're all human beings.
Do you know who Bill Hicks is?
Yeah, I love Bill Hicks, man. For sure, yeah, I know who Bill Hicks is.
That was like my idol my entire 20s.
Yeah,
I
for sure.
and to me it's funny, but he's less a comedian. To me it was philosophy. And I argue that there is a thin line between comedian and philosopher at
I
times.
would agree 100% with that.
Yeah. And Hicks crossed that line. He was one of those like Carlin or
Yeah,
Chappelle that
yeah.
crossed that line into philosopher. And he said something about how we are all the same
You're all
being
one consciousness
expressing
experience
ourselves
self
subjectively.
subjectively. Yeah.
Yeah.
All
And
matter
that
is
really
merely
stuck with
condensed
me.
energy at a slower vibration.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good one.
Here's the weather.
Yeah. Here's Bob with the weather.
Yep. But it's those type of thoughts that I believe people need to have, because what is turning to religion but trying to comprehend the nature of humanity, the nature of why among all of this infinite space and all of these infinite stars are you here? Are you aware and it matters?
Right.
Because it does matter. People
Right.
want to think when they presented with all of this vastness that it doesn't matter. But the opposite is true, as we said, because of the inconceivable chance that you're present right now. And one of the most oddly inspiring things I ever heard was an eon ago, you were a star. And an eon from now, you will be again. And that's all there is to it. We're made of parts of dead stars
Yeah,
that
we're all-
will
we're all
one day
stardust.
become. We're all stardust.
Yeah.
And there is, I don't understand in the vastness of everything how people can become so obsessed with something as petty as you've got a different color skin than I do.
Right.
And like,
You know, it
I
goes
guess
right back
I
to
could
that.
understand
It goes right back to that
back into
division.
other.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
division that we were talking about earlier. You know, it's that illusion of separateness.
Yeah. And I can understand kind of back in the day because we used to be stupid as shit.
We're so come on, man. You're giving us too much credit. We're still
I mean,
stupid
we
as
still
shit.
are. But like,
Otherwise, everybody'd have this shit figured out by now.
we know the earth is round, or you should.
Yes, you
and
absolutely fucking should.
we know these certain things. And like, we know that there's not people genetically inferior to us. That's not a thing.
Right.
We have the science to prove all of these old trains of thought to be just ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean,
And we've
fucking
learned better.
phrenology used to be an accepted science. Let's be realistic, you know.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. That hypnotism book that I have from 1907, it references phrenology a couple of
Oh,
times.
amazing.
And that's one of those things I like to point out as we don't really know Jack, because 100 years ago, that was legitimate evidence, admissible in court, was the shape of your fucking head. Like, at Exhibit A, the defendant's brow line.
It's so
Obviously,
bizarre.
the brow line of a thief. Like, and I think about that a lot.
Right.
What that we hold to today will just be considered just wild ignorance in another 100 years or less.
Probably a lot of shit. Social media for sure.
And one of the interesting things that makes me feel very privileged to have been born in this time is people don't realize how insane human progress is.
Oh yeah.
Like,
we are
it
living in
took
the
us,
most
like-
bizarre time ever. This is like possibly the most bizarre, greatest time to ever be alive. It's just
like,
so
it
fucking
took
strange.
us, I think, 50,000 years or so to get out of the Stone Age.
Mhm.
And from the Bronze Age to the Stone Age was 10,000 years. Then the Iron Age was like 5,000 years. And then so on until you get to the Industrial Age, which only
Right.
lasted 200 years. And the Golden Age, which only lasted 50 years. And the Computer Age, which only lasted fucking 20. And so now we're at this spot of human development that Have you ever heard of the singularity?
Oh, absolutely.
It's the spot where human development becomes immeasurable. That the ages of expansion happen so rapidly they can no longer be mentioned.
Right.
Noted. Do you know we have a date for that?
Oh yeah.
Theorized. Yeah, 2045.
Oh sweet.
So
Coming right up.
in theory, if we can make it through this hellstorm that we've made, we can actually live to see the singularity,
Fuck.
the pinnacle of human development.
I'm buying my tickets tomorrow.
No shit. And I desperately hope that we do some waking up and some serious thinking in the next 20, 25 years. But it's an interesting thing because I think about the time I've been alive. Like the technological advancement has been
mind blowing.
Absolutely insane.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Like,
yeah. Dude, I remember
the home video.
Like I said, I'm 40, man. I remember like when like America Online first came. You know what I'm saying? I was like 13.
When they send you a new fucking
they send you
disc.
It wasn't
week.
even a floppy disk at that point. I think it was still a fucking 1.5 inch fucking floppy. Yeah. And you know, it was just crazy. Like looking at that and just going from that to where we are now, you know, in 27 years, you know, just watching I mean, to go
I don't
from
recall who said it, but it was at a certain point of development, technology becomes indistinguishable from magic, and that's
it's pretty magic.
Go back 100 years and explain your magic black mirror to somebody without sounding like a witch.
I was about to say you're a fucking witch for sure, sorcerer,
and that's kind of the interesting thing is
be gone with you, necromancer.
Especially with my field, because my field is very closely linked to consciousness research.
Yeah, you're probably still considered a witch.
Yeah, exactly. I've actually been accused of witchcraft doing this.
See, I knew it. I fucking knew it.
Yeah,
that's people for you.
Well, I mean,
people fear
one
what
of my
they don't
friends
understand.
gave me some perspective, and because I was like, man, fuck this guy, what a weirdo, and he was like, dude, think about it, like. You just talked to somebody. You just said words to somebody and changed their behavior, changed the way they think. So, to a certain kind of mind, that just looked like fucking sorcery.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it kind of is.
Yeah.
Like, you know, for all intents and purposes, it kind of is. You know, and
you have to ask. It's because take alchemy. What was classically considered a magical pursuit eventually just became organic science,
right? And
is now a legitimate field.
Yeah,
it's that natural progression.
Yep.
That these and for example, you have all of these strange phenomenon that happen with the human mind that we consider metaphysical. Well, once we actually figure out consciousness, what it means, it stops being a metaphysical question and it starts being accepted science. And people aren't even aware of it because, of course, we've reached a point in society we aren't interested in science or scientists right now. Do you know what a QNG is? A quantum number generator.
Yes.
If people have not heard of that, there is an active effort right now to create a device that is capable of reading fluctuations in the collective consciousness. And it's working. They have valid experiments.
You can get online and look at it. Yeah, you can.
Oh, you can play with it.
That's what I'm saying. You can see like and look at the spikes when like world events happen. It's fucking crazy. If you haven't checked it out, for real, go check it out. Like
there's an app you can download on your phone called Randonautica that actually uses QNGs experimentally. And I'm pretty sure they're just using the app to gather a large data set. But we are reaching the point that us may be quantifiable. That what it means to exist what that means may be a thing. And all of these people who tout AI and all of that, which please no, to get AI, we must first solve consciousness, because we are talking about giving something consciousness.
Right.
And I say, oh no, because of course, this is one of the things I've sat there and had existential thoughts about.
Yeah.
How do we know what a machine's emotions would be? Like, because if something exists, has a consciousness,
Right.
it has emotion, like in theory. So what if it has emotions we can't quantify, we can't understand? What if the first problem that happens with machine life is we literally don't understand each other? And
We see what happens when we don't understand each other.
yeah,
It's fucking
that's
war.
another human.
Yeah.
And to me, it's a strange thing, because we're attempting to, and this is going to be non sequitur as fuck, I already warn you. We're attempting to communicate with extraterrestrial life and create machine life and all of that. And we can't even talk to an octopus. We cannot talk to the organism that we are pretty sure has real intelligence on this earth. And to me, maybe this is just weird thoughts. Until such time as we can communicate with another species of quantifiable intelligence, what hope do we have of communicating with something distant from our planet? There's a movie that I borderline obsessed with called The Arrival. Have you ever seen that?
I've heard of it, but I haven't seen it yet.
It is absolutely amazing. It talks about how, basically, without giving anything away, how language defines our perception. And that's been the thing that fascinates me. I study Russian, and expressing myself in that language is different. Interpreting my world in that language is different.
Right.
And there exists on Earth a people. I don't recall the name of them right now. This can be found online, Google somewhere. It's an insular culture, and their language, which is unique to them, does not possess numbers or object permanence. So they don't know about numbers or the concept that if something's not there, you can still talk about it. Like if something is not present, the structure to speak about it is not in their language, so they don't perceive it.
Interesting.
So, knowing that, what perceptions do we lack in our own language of things that we can't even conceive of because we lack that in our language?
Right.
And that's what the movie's about.
Well, that's super cool.
Because the aliens come down, and the way their language is the perception of a thing that we lack.
Right.
Something on the scale of numbers or object permanence.
Yeah. Well, I mean, shit, without language, technically nothing exists, because without any way to describe or define, like,
well,
there's the object, but like, there's no way to transfer the idea, and so like, without.
It's interesting because in terms of communication, our words, like the words themselves, are only 7% of our communication. And it's a detail. It's the details, pretty much, is what they handle. But if you think about it, you could go anywhere in the world, and if you're hungry, you can express it.
Right.
If you're tired or scared, you can express it. That there's not language needed to, at a certain level, communicate your needs to another human.
Right.
And it's just the finer points of language that let us work out the details, that let us coordinate projects and have a civilization.
Right.
But in terms of basic communication, we don't really need that.
Yeah. I mean, as far as like actual human existence, like the necessities of human life, like you were talking about, whether it be food or with sleep or fear or anything, a sexual desire. These are all things that can be be translated without language for sure. It's when you get
Yes.
exactly like you said, it's the minute details. It's all the surrounding shit that is really necessitates the language itself. That's that's
And it's
an interesting thought.
and like
I
I
mean,
said, if you haven't seen The Arrival, you absolutely need to.
I'm gonna have to check
will
it out now for sure.
blow your mind and haunt your dreams.
Awesome.
It's the wildest thing.
Well, hey man,
Uh,
that's fucking cool. That's super cool.
Another movie that I can't recommend more to people that kind of more in line with what I do. Have you ever seen that Pixar movie Inside Out?
I have not.
I have never seen a more perfect movie about mental health in my entire life.
Really?
And it's just a little kids movie that explains why we have to be sad, but like it was so layered and complex. Like I've got notes that I took during the movie.
Got a whole
Just
dissertation
because,
written
like,
on
for real. like there's a part where they enter in the subconscious, and the way they do that and what they have to do that was related to hypnosis, and like this weird analogy for hypnosis. It blew my mind.
Right.
And there's all these things that I've spoken of relating to trauma and the way that we view things that were expressed in that movie. So that's one of those that all of my clients, I very much encourage, if they haven't seen it already, to check that movie out.
Yeah.
Partially because the movie's so effective, I can actually use parts of it in hypnotic suggestion to relate your own feelings and your own processing.
Right. Well, shit, I want to watch that now. I might watch that tonight. I feel like
I recommend it.
I feel like I'm in the mood for a Pixar movie tonight. I'm feeling kind of light and airy. I'm going to go to the gym.
It's a funny movie. Like, it's legitimately entertaining. It's a kid's movie. It's funny and like
check it out.
But like when you watch it from the perspective of this is about mental health, it is actually used in the mental health profession, and you kind of examine the metaphors that they're using and the way they're explaining things. It's fascinating because they're explaining to children the necessity of sadness, of why sadness isn't a bad thing, and about how it's needed and why it's needed.
Right.
And it was so simple in its depth that I learned something, that it changed my perspective on the notion of sadness and why we're sad.
Right.
And I sat there with my mouth open after the movie ended because I couldn't believe they made something that comprehensive and well put into a kid's movie.
Okay,
Not to pimp out Pixar or anything.
Right. Well, I obviously can't like not have a conversation with a hypnotist, and we're talking about movies without talking about Inception, right? So like, how'd you feel about Inception?
There.
Nah.
I hate
not a
Christopher
fan.
Nolan. I hate Christopher Nolan.
I knew that was going to be it. That's why I was like, not a Chris Nolan fan. You either love him or you hate him, you know?
I liked Batman Begins. That's about it. But if somebody wants to see a good movie about hypnosis, because there's so much bullshit out there.
Yeah, for sure.
There is one good movie made about hypnosis. It was made in 1949, starring Orson Welles, and it's called Black Magic. But the way that they show hypnosis being done in that is proper. It's actually hypnosis and hypnotic suggestion. And of course it's exaggerated a bit, but I was actually shown it in school, and we were walked through, and each of the hypnosis scenes was broken down, and they explained like what he was doing in terms of the requirements for a hypnotic modality. And it was amazing. It's actually kind of got me into classic movies a little bit, because I watched that and genuinely enjoyed it. And I was like, if I could get into a movie from 49 like this, what else is out there?
Yeah, man. My ex-wife used to watch Turner Classic Movies all the time. So I've watched like so many like old classic movies, like more than I ever like was interested in watching. But there's some really good ones, man. There's some really good movies that I will still go back to and be like, I'm going to watch this. You know, and it's like a movie from like an obscure movie from like 1944 or something. And I'm like, no, I'm going to watch this. Like,
well, like every now and again, I still like to watch Snow White, because not because I'm particularly into Disney, just because I know the story behind it, about how it took 14 years to make, and it was each cell was hand drawn by a professional artist,
Right.
and like each individual cell of millions of cells of that movie was in its own right a painstaking work of art.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
to me,
So cool,
that
man.
merits revisiting,
Yeah.
and with that in mind, to watch that, and because
Right.
it
Just
is
the sheer
quite literally
fucking
art in
effort.
motion.
Yeah. Just the
Yeah.
sheer effort put into it. Like,
Yeah.
this is fucking art, like at its purest form.
Yes.
Yeah. It's beautiful.
And that's not really a thing anymore. There's not things that take that much effort anymore. Things
No,
are very fast
nobody-
and instant now.
Yeah. Nobody puts in that much effort because everybody's got this fucking instant gratification need
Yeah.
because of that dopamine dump. Thanks, Facebook.
There's this God, what's it called? There's this animation coming out. That's this guy that works. He's been like a Disney animator and all of these crazy things for this famous movie. And I want to say it's called like Dead God or something like that. But it's this thing that he's worked on for 30 years. And he's about to come out with it.
Oh, shit.
And it's this crazy, surrealist stop motion.
Oh, wow.
Like,
That sounds
insanity.
fucking cool. That sounds fucking cool as
And
shit. Oh, yeah.
He's basically like a master puppeteer and animator that this is his life's work. This is his magnum opus.
That's so cool, man.
And
I appreciate that.
I'm so excited to see that.
God damn.
Yeah.
I appreciate that somebody, that whole idea of a fucking magnum opus. Like, this is the culmination of my life's work. Like, that's so fucking inspiring to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a few examples out there of things you can see that were somebody's life's work, somebody that poured everything they had into it. And to me, those are the most fascinating things.
Yeah.
Because, like, I couldn't stick to something for 30 years, little though a singular vision. And this man has this thing that he's about to come out with that is that. And I have to see it, because how terrifying is that for him? How gratifying, how so many different emotions